Okay, hello. We are going to paint a grade, which is just a flat color. As you saw there, I was just using ultramarine blue. And notice I had to tilt my board with my watercolor paper. I'm using Archer's 140 cold press here. And as you can see, there's a bead right there, okay? That bead is going to help me draw that color down. Whoops, I made a little splash there. But that's okay. This is just basically a training basics video, basic training video. So now you get basically a flat color. Um, you don't have to be perfect, in watercolor. It's not. We're not painting in airbrushing. We're making these nice shapes. Here I'm just softening the edges. This is just uh, an option you could do if you wanted to shape this, reshape the shape or get rid of the edges at that point. Now what I'm doing here is this is basically a retraction technique. I'm actually pulling the paint up because I wanted my sky to be one flat color so that I could come back and just add a little embellishment. This is very quick. If I was working a little larger, that shape is very tiny, probably about 5 inches by maybe 4 inches. So, but if I was to do a painting, a large painting, I would work very quickly. Now, the brother to the grade is the gradient, where we're going to get a light, dark to light gradation of color, still using the same ultramarine blue. I think I put a little bit of cobalt in there, but I think it's predominantly ultramarine blue. Now I start with a very dark wash, and as I get to the middle ground, right now, I'm just really using water. And this one I go down just a little, I think I go a little further down here. Okay, the last gradient or the last wash was completely water, just fresh water. Okay, wet into wet, dry brushing technique. All right, so what I do here is I start with, well, you have to wet the paper to do wet into wet. So for this video, I'm creating a little spot. Now look at that. That looks like 4th of July, right? That's what the colors do. You can leave these and just let them sit there. They'll dry kind of like that. They'll get a little softer on the edges. But for the most part, they'll keep these shapes if you just let it sit flat. That's the thing. But now I want to kind of bleed them together, so I'm moving the whole board around just to get blends. Now this is a great technique if you're doing trees in the distance on misty, foggy days. Of course, you wouldn't be using these super bright colors. You'd be using very muted grays and blues. Here again, I'm showing you the consistency of the paint, which was not thin but not thick. It's somewhere in the middle. And you can see, okay, I tap out a lot of the color. In fact, the first brush, dry brush effect, was very light because I took too much paint off. And this is where, if you're going to do this technique on your painting, practice. Get some old paintings. I usually use the back of my old paintings, and now paint in the clouds. Okay, so it is what it is. We're painting in the neighborhood. What does that mean? Well, we're going to start painting the sky, but as we start getting into the cloud shape, we're going to keep the clouds white over this this blue. Now this is still the ultramarine blue. It's watered down just a little bit, and I felt that it needed a little bit more intensity. So I think I add a little bit of cerulean blue and phthalo blue later on as a second wash. But what I wanted to do here is just show you how I would progress if I were to do a painting of, and this is basically just memory painting. And you guys could do this too, like just think of a scene that you've seen a million times, or get a photograph to help you kind of recollect the shapes and so forth. But this is a simple scene. The dry brush is kind of glistening on the, the light glistening on the water. That's pretty much it. That's what that represents there. And we can kind of get an idea of what everything looks like now. We have our cloud shapes, but the clouds are kind of flat. They're just white outlines with these billowy tops. So now what we have to do is we have to anchor that cloud by putting in some cloud shadows. Now, cloud shadows do have the same color as the sky, but usually they're a little bit more neutral. They're never as strong or as blue. If they were just as blue as the sky, you really wouldn't get that effect of the shadows being underneath and supporting those clouds. It would almost look flat. Now here I'm going back in just using a little darker wash. I just went in for a little bit more pigment than I did originally. And now I'm going back and I'm getting my sky just a little bit more contrasted. And if that's all wet, okay, so the sky was basically still wet, I can just drop that color in, and what will happen is it'll fall into place. Now, I have to move it around. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see that, but just like we did in the wet into wet, you want to move the paint around. Okay, unfortunately, my camera didn't follow my moves, but you can get the idea. Now, I still felt that that was a little wishy-washy. I wanted to get a little bit more dominant sky color in there, and the next movement will be a darker. Now, notice I'm on a gradient. Okay, so I lifted my my paper up, the gator board, and now I'm just letting the paint fall back into those shapes, leaving a little bit of the blue come through. That's fine. You know, that's like a soft edge. You could give it a little bit of a spray, but you have to be careful. You don't want that blue going, interfering with the clouds. So make sure that they stay where they need to stay. And I still saved a little bit of the dry brushing, by painting basically around. Now I'm just softening that the horizon line a bit, and darkening. I want my sky to be a little bit, the sky cloud to be a little bit more, have a little bit more oomph, some contrast there. So I went back and hit it again. And then I'm going to dry everything so we can actually see the glare, and that's how wet this thing is. So you can see it's quite wet, and I felt that it was a little too wet in certain areas that I wanted to take away some of the pigment. I didn't want the clouds to overwhelm the foreground, which we're going to paint in just a second now. So now that we have our cloud, we have our water, we have a little bit of sunshine on the water. Now I want to create a landmass. So I am just painting in, and just by the addition of this horizontal line, broken line, thick and thin, all of a sudden now we get this feeling of a placement, right? Before it was a little ambiguous. I mean, we did see the clouds and the water, but now it's actually looking like something, right? We have, and I noticed I do use a lot of the blue. I think that I added a little bit of, I think this was sap green and the sky blue. And then I added a little bit more of the blue to the left. It's drying a little strange, but that's okay because I want a little texture in that landmass. So I'm not trying to fix anything at this point because I'm going to come in and I'm going to add some shadow shapes. And those shadow shapes are going to signify form, obviously. And there it is. And I felt, well, it needs something even more than landmass. So I pencil in, as I'm finding my pencil, and I'm going to pencil in a small sailboat. I don't want it right smack in the middle, so I move it a little off center. Okay, that's just for composition. Got the mast in. I decided to make the hull dark. So this could be anywhere. It could be the tropics. If the water was a little bit more turquoise, it could be the Bahamas. But this is anywhere. And just carefully painting in, just the hull a little bit. Quickly just adding the mast and some of now the reflections of the sailboat, basically the reflections of the hull, and leaving a little bit of the blue of the water coming through. And there's the reflection of the mast very quickly. And yeah, so basically getting almost like a slight silhouette. The light looks like, it's basically coming from, I believe it's like the left side. No, it's coming from the right side. And so that's why the shadows on the mountains are on the left. All right, just accenting that. And now I'm just going to put a little bit of, like these softer waves in the foreground. So now I'm going to go a little darker. I just need a little bit more, and that's it. Don't do any more. You want to keep everything fresh. If you're going to do like a little sketch like this, less is more. The more you go back, the more it's going to look overworked. Okay, painting rounded objects. Basically, we're painting a ball here. We're going to start with a C shape. Okay, now I realized I didn't have enough paint to do what I need to do. And now it's just water, basically. And I'm turning the brush almost like in a sumi painting style. All right? And that's basically it. So if you're going to paint, I don't know, lemons, you would do this with, lemon color, gourds. Sargent has a beautiful painting of just gourds when, I don't know where he was in Greece. And he used this technique exactly the way we see it. And he was able to get those subtle rounded forms. Now, could you do this, maybe a little bit more academically and getting a little bit more halftone? And absolutely. What you would do is you would do this and then add another color, just a little darker. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in class. Bye now.